Hi everyone, it is my great pleasure to talk to you today about music and its role as a tool by which civilizations function by. Music is one of the greatest achievements of mankind. We all like music, whether it's classical, pop, jazz, folk, or any other genre. Music reflects our personality, preferences, temperament, and nature. This passion is something we all share, irrelevant of our background. Today, I will, however, discuss music through a different perspective, that of a tool of shaping and many times leading cultural change. Is this possible, you may ask? Other arts like architecture, sculpture, painting are commonly used in explaining cultural and societal change. The palace at Versailles showcases Louis XIV's absolute rule. Michelangelo's sculptures the rebirth of classical learning and values of the ancient world. So why not music? Music differs from other arts in that it is not tangible. It takes place in time and not in space. We have not heard music performed at the time of Louis XIV in Versailles, or listened to Mozart or Bach perform themselves. Only with the invention of recorded sound have we started to experience the actual sound of music. To argue my case of music as a tool civilizations function by, I have chosen several key moments in history. They are, of course, not the only ones. There are so many examples across civilizations that can illustrate the same. There are three aspects that this presentation will follow: societal, economic, and political. As my first case, I have chosen the figure of Claudia Monteverdi, known in music as the father of the opera and orchestra. The opera and orchestra are two phenomenons that closely reflect societal change. Monteverdi strongly believed in the opera as an institutional representation to the changes society was going through. Let me clarify this. Up to Monteverdi's time, music was strongly divided between classes. The church and aristocracy controlled official music, whilst the poorer, lower classes entertained themselves with folk music. With the rise of a new merchant class, the opera became a place where most classes, apart from the very poor, found themselves together in one spot, enjoying a show, a good story accompanied by music. Monteverdi's belief in the power of the opera brought to the creation of the first public opera house in Venice. Thus, the opera became a stage for social and economic change. Monteverdi's other groundbreaking legacy was the orchestra. Musicians at the time used to gather in more or less random groups that performed together. Monteverdi brought musicians together into an organized structure called the orchestra. That would lead to the development of the professional musician and carry the consciousness of employee rights. A bit over 100 years later, we witness the birth of Beethoven, whose statement, "Music can change the world," certainly reflected Monteverdi's legacy. Beethoven wrote monumental music that influences us to this day. As a contemporary of the French Revolution, Beethoven carried the ideals of the revolution into his music, but also into his everyday life. There is a great story which illustrates Beethoven's mindset and beliefs. Visiting Count Lichnowsky in his castle in 1806 in the town of Hradec, today's Czech Republic, the Count asked Beethoven to play the piano for some French officers who he had invited to the castle. Beethoven was furious. He resented French officers after the imperial coronation of Napoleon, to whom Beethoven had wanted to dedicate his famous Symphony No. 3, the Eroica. Napoleon had completely disillusioned Beethoven's ideals. A hefty argument broke out between the Count and Beethoven, the latter angrily storming out of the castle. Before leaving, he wrote his famous letter saying, "Count, who are you? You are by accident and family. Who am I? I am thanks to myself. There are a lot of counts, but there is only one Beethoven." When we look at images of him and Mozart, not even a generation apart, we see how Beethoven discarded the wig and announced a new, romantic and freedom-fighting 19th century. Beethoven's ideals are alive to this day. The Ode to Joy from his Ninth Symphony is the anthem of the European Union. Moving on 60 to 70 years later, we see the power of the opera again at hand. Giuseppe Verdi, the great operatic composer, became a symbol for the Risorgimento, the movement to unite Italy in the mid-19th century. The chorus Va Pensiero from Verdi's opera Nabucco was a sort of anthem of the movement, symbolizing the fight for freedom. It echoes similar sentiments to this day. An interesting fact is that Verdi's surname was used to project the new Italian state, Viva Emanuele Re d'Italia. North of Italy in Bohemia, then part of the Habsburg monarchy, a similar national political movement was happening. It was the awakening of the Slavs, and music here played a prominent role. To be more precise, it was the opera again. The opera at the time was a solely German affair. The two major theaters in Prague performed only German-speaking operas. The national Czech uprising looked for its own musical expression. The opera was the right place to start. The National Opera in Prague was built by donations from citizens so that operas could be performed in Czech language. Composer Bedřich Smetana composed music, the most famous, his symphonic cycle My Homeland, which to this day evokes strong sentiments and is used for social political purposes, as I will shortly illustrate. Moving forward 100 years, in 1989, the Velvet Revolution broke out. I personally am a witness of those days, as I just started studying at the Prague Academy of Music. Living in a student dormitory, I was following day to day, hour to hour developments. The Velvet Revolution is also known as the Revolution of the Poets and Musicians, and rightly so. Václav Havel, writer and dissident, was one of the key leaders of the revolution to dismantle the communist regime. In the evening of Friday, November the 17th, 1989, an unusual occurrence happened at the concert of the Czech Philharmonic. The applause suddenly turned into cries for change. That day in the afternoon, special forces attacked a small bunch of protesters. The following days, protests grew, and by the end of the weekend, protests for change were fully underway. For the students who were the leaders of these protests turned revolution, the Czech Philharmonic gave every morning at Žofín, a concert hall on an island in the Vltava, concerts to support the students. Music by 19th century Czech national composers Bedřich Smetana, mentioned previously, and Antonín Dvořák were performed. I myself was a witness to these concerts. Music was at the forefront of the revolution. In this presentation, I have discussed key moments from music history where music leaders, musicians, and music organizations led the way forward, changing society to its core. From the father of the orchestra and opera, Claudia Monteverdi, who viewed the opera as a key factor in shaping a new 17th century world, to the toppling of communist regimes in Eastern Europe in 1989. This presentation has argued the case that music is an important tool civilizations throughout history have functioned by, and that its creative power still possesses the strength to continue its role as a vital tool in shaping societal values and beliefs. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas. Please share them in the comments below, and feel free to reach out to me through social media or my contact info in the description below. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.